Hello Year 10, this is Miss Bartley and today I'm going to talk you through your White Tower lesson. Before we begin going through the lesson, I want to start off by doing a little bit of revision with you. Can you read through the following questions and match them up to the correct answers? If you want to pause the video now and spend no more than 2 minutes completing this task, and then afterwards we'll go through and self-mark these answers. Okay, let's go through the answers. So, A. What encouraged William the Conqueror to choose London as a location to build the White Tower? That would match up to number 3. London was a good location as it meant that it was able to provide a prominent position that overlooked the majority of the City of London. B. What was the advantage of building a stone keep castle? That would be number 1. Unlike a wooden Motte and Bailey castle, stone keep castles did not rot and they could not be burnt down in flames. C. Name one reason that motivated William I to build the tower, and that would be number 4. William used the location of the River Thames to build it for economic purposes. William was able to control trade along the river. D. Why was Dover of strategic importance to William I? And that would go with number 5. Dover was the closest port to Normandy. It was vital for William to bring reinforcements and supplies for the rest of his invasion of England, and it would also allow him to have a quick escape should he need to retreat back to Normandy. And E. Name 2 possible functions of the White Tower. And that would go to number 2, a royal residence and a method of exerting political control. So today's lesson is going to be about how was the White Tower designed. So our learning outcomes today are going to be the following. We're going to be able to explain how the White Tower was designed, look at what materials were used, who was involved in the construction and the designing of the White Tower, and how the design of the tower changed over time. And then we'll finish our lesson off by completing an extended writing question to show how much you have understood today's lesson. So over the last few weeks you have been building up on your knowledge and understanding as to why the location of the tower was important for William I, who is also known as William the Conqueror, why the White Tower was created, and the function of the White Tower as a means for control and defending William and the City of London. This week, you will be adding to your knowledge and understanding of the White Tower by investigating how it was designed and built. So for your first task, I would just like you to have a go at filling in the blanks as a quick 1-minute task to just refresh your minds on the work that you have done already so far with the construction of the White Tower. So if you'd like to pause this video and have a go at filling in the blanks for about a minute, and then we'll go through these answers. Okay? So here are the answers. William I wanted to achieve 2 main things when he was on his conquest to building castles all over England. He wanted to make sure that they represented William as powerful, I do apologise, and wanting to control his newly conquered kingdom. The White Tower began construction in the 1070s around old Roman walls to enforce this idea that the White Tower would be a stronghold in London. Okay, so that's just a brief recap on what we've already done so far on the construction of the White Tower. So for your first task, your second task, I want you to have a think about how this tower would have been designed. Normally, when you think of large structures such as the White Tower, you tend to think of cranes, scaffolding, builders with high-vis jackets and construction helmets on. However, back in the 1070s, this wouldn't have been the case for those involved in building the tower. So I want you to have a look at what we can assume as to how the tower was built. Can you study source A which is an artist's reconstruction of the White Tower at the start of building. And I want you to tell me what you can infer from the tower at this point of its construction. I'd like you to think about what materials might have been used, who was enforced to help with the construction, and what purpose did the River Thames serve when building this tower. So you can see that I've added in some circles just to help you concentrate on which parts of the source I think you'd need to focus on. When you've thought of some ideas, can you jot down some notes in this answer box for me, please? So if you want to pause the video and spend about 5 minutes coming up with your ideas for me. Okay, let's have a look at what we might be able to infer from the development of the White Tower. So let's go over to this circle. So at the beginning of this task, I said that, you'd normally think of scaffolding being around great buildings. You see them all the time, particularly in large cities, and it's quite clear that the Normans had this idea that scaffolding would be need to use to reinforce structures to make sure that they hold together and that they are upright. These scaffoldings would typically be made of wood, and there would be some type of stairs to help any builders to get up and down along the walls and continue to build it. Okay, so we've got wood here used for the scaffolding. We can see that there's, I do believe it's some type of bricks or some type of stone that would be used as another material. And we've got plenty of earth around here as well, and a moat to help enforce this idea that it should not be, should it be attacked, it would almost be impenetrable due to the water being around the castle. Okay, so who would be enforced to help with the construction? So that's mainly in this area. We can see that there's a couple of little houses or a few huts almost to probably house the builders that were there, because this would be a project that was undertaken for such a long time. It started construction in the 1070s and it wasn't actually finished until the late 1090s. So it was a large project to undertake. And these people that were involved would probably be the Anglo-Saxons. If they were involved with helping building the White Tower, then William I would probably reward them with some type of land or perhaps money, like we've discussed when looking at the feudal system last year. And then finally, what purpose did the River Thames serve building the White Tower? So you can see here that we have got a couple of boats or potentially ships, and they would be used along the River Thames to transport or maybe even import different types of materials, so that would be easier to take to the tower rather than risk breaking any of the materials along these roads, which we can see here. Okay. So, like many Norman castles, the White Tower was initially ordered to be built by William I from wood shortly after the Norman invasion. It was originally built as a timber Motte and Bailey castle, however it was later rebuilt by his son William II in stone. And you probably realised that at this point stone castles were going to be much better and much stronger than wooden castles, because it would have been noted that they were easily torn down by fire, or they just weren't sustainable during harsh weather conditions. So what I'd like you to do is to spend a couple of minutes, no more than 4 minutes, explaining what the benefit would be to building the White Tower out of stone instead of wood. So if you'd like to pause the video and have a go at answering that little question for me, please. Okay. So the White Tower was actually one of the first castles to be built out of stone in England. The idea behind constructing the tower out of stone was to create a visible expression of Norman power. It was not only designed to be a fortress of great strength and a magnificent symbol, but it was also to be copied from previous Norman architecture. So back in Normandy, the White Tower actually mirrored these types of structures in Normandy. The materials that were used to form this magnificent Norman architecture were Kentish ragstone, important Caen stone, I think I'm pronouncing it right, which was a type of light limestone, which we can see here, the old Roman walls, and which is this, and earth to construct the mound, to name a few. So we already know that the White Tower was built on some type of hill. Earth was probably used to reinforce this hill even further to make it so high to overlook the rest of London. Now, Caen stone is imported from Normandy, so it is a Norman type of stone, all right? And we're going to look at why this stone might have been used on the next slide and how it's linked to the designer. Who was employed to construct the White Tower then? So William I entrusted the Norman monk Bishop Gundulf, who was from Caen, as the chief architect and the master builder of the White Tower. Not only did Gundulf build the White Tower, but he also oversaw the construction of the castle and cathedral at Rochester and also at Colchester too. So he was very well known for his architectural designs, and he was quite a popular designer too. The historian Seabrook argued that Gundulf was clearly William's trusted assistant in large and complex building operations, quite clearly as he built the cathedral and castle at Rochester and Colchester. And he was also a protege of Lanfranc, the Archbishop of Canterbury, which you will have learnt about from Year 9 when you studied your Normand unit. Like I said earlier, Gundulf was a monk at Caen and he was brought to London in 1070, so he was very well acquainted with that type of stone, and he used that back in Normandy to help with these Norman structures. It's also interesting actually about Gundulf that he initially declined to build the White Tower from William, as he thought he was too old to build the castle, but he eventually accepted due to his loyalty to William because he was a Norman himself, and he was very loyal to William, and he actually outlasted both William I and his son William II. So that just shows he wasn't too old to build the White Tower. What I'd like you to do now then is to have a look at the worksheet that I've provided for you, and I'd like you to complete the table. I'd like you to read each source and explain how they suggest how unique Gundulf's design of the tower was and whether it achieved Norman authority. Because as you will know throughout this study of the White Tower, power, authority and control is a running theme. Okay? So if you want to spend about 10 minutes reading through those sources and answering those questions, then you can pause this video for me. Okay. Another thing that is important to point out is the design of the tower actually changed over time. Okay, so it didn't just stay as this magnificent, powerful, authoritative structure. William I never saw the White Tower finish construction, as he died in 1087, and therefore much of the construction of the White Tower took place during the reign of his son, William II. William II favoured a more refined and exotic style of architecture. He wanted it to be a little bit more than just a symbol of fear, of authority, and he wanted it to be quite a comfortable place to reside in at times. And as a result, he may have been more concerned about the comforts of his palace at Westminster, which was also being built at the time. So he's connecting the two structures together, and he's thinking, I want the White Tower to be exactly like the Palace of Westminster. And certainly for most of his successors, it was the usual practice when staying at London to live at Westminster and to move to the White Tower in only extraordinary or dangerous circumstances. So if there was the event of an attack, he wanted to make sure that it was well designed to suit his comfort when staying at the White Tower. So this is William II here, who succeeds William the Conqueror. Over time, during the reigns of William II, Henry II, and future English monarchs, the design of the White Tower has significantly been altered. Towers have been constructed, walls and gateways have been added to serve the purpose as a prison and torture chamber, which some of you may already identify the tower as. An example of this was in the 1270s. King Edward I had a watergate, so this is the watergate here, designed, known as Traitor's Gate, which is probably one of the most famous parts of the design of the White Tower. And that would transport prisoners to the tower in order to inspire further fear and intimidation. So future monarchs, or past monarchs should I say, have always reverted back to the White Tower as being this object of fear, and always wanting to inspire that it's such a controlling and authoritative structure. And some famous people that have actually been through this Watergate are notably Anne Boleyn, who was the Queen of England, and Queen Elizabeth I as well. So what I'd like you to do, your final task for this lesson, is to use the information that you've been provided with, and I would like you to explain how the design and the construction of the White Tower promoted Norman influence. So here is your writing structure that I would like you to follow, please. So you've got one way that William I promoted Norman influence through the design and construction of the White Tower was, so you could say that it was using Norman materials to help enforce this idea that it was a Norman building. You could also use that he used a Norman designer, which is Bishop Gundulf. The evidence I have for this, so I'd like you to just add in examples of the different types of materials that might have been used, the builders involved, what the materials were used to represent, and then I'd like you to explain how the Normans promoted power and control through these examples. Okay, so as always, we want you to really go in depth with these explanations. The more in depth you go with this, the easier it's going to be to help you revise this topic when it comes to next year, okay? And it will just enforce this idea that you have a strong knowledge and understanding of this site study, okay? So I'd like you to repeat this process twice. So find 2 different ways that the design and construction of the White Tower promoted Norman influence, okay? And I would expect you to spend no more than 10 minutes on this piece of work, okay? And that concludes our lesson for today, okay? I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if there are any questions or you want a little bit more advice on with any of the White Tower lessons that we've completed so far, please feel free to email myself, Miss Bartley, Mrs. Hudson, or Mr. Brown, and we will try our best to answer your queries. Okay, thank you for watching, and I hope you are all well and take care.